Thank you for coming out. We have a great program this afternoon, and we've got an excellent attendance. Matter of fact, I think we're completely sold out. First of all, I'd like to thank our sponsors who help make City Club possible. It's through their contributions that allow us to keep our meal prices at a reasonable amount and allow us to operate. And I'd like to thank, if you would take a minute to, as you see these names scroll up, look at the names. These are the people who help sponsor us and provide us this opportunity to put these forums on. I would like to thank two of our new sponsors who just recently joined us, First Montana Bank and Missoula Broadcasting Company. And thank you to those folks. I should probably introduce myself. I'm Jim Roy, and I'm the new president of City Club Missoula. I took over after Larry Brem after many years of helping lead us on our way. Next, we want to thank the members of City Club. And as many of you know, that City Club is open to everyone. You don't have to be a member to attend. We encourage everyone to come. But if you would like to become a member, that allows us to communicate with you more directly, send you emails and updates on what's taking place, let you know what programs are going to be available, and you also get a little small discount on what you pay for meals each month. So if you're interested in that, please go to our cityclubmissoula.com website and just click that on that site, and you can become a member, and we'd love to have you join us as a member. Next, we want to thank Missoula Community Access Television. There's a nice gentleman in the back with the camera. Missoula MCAT films every one of our programs. So if you miss a program and you want to see what was said, or there was something that was mentioned here and you want to go back and replay it, you can go to the MCAT site and you're able to look at this program again. The program here is very simple. Our format is, after our presenters give their program, we break into what we call table talk. And so all of you, for about 5 to 10 minutes, have the opportunity to, first of all, when you break into table talk, if you see someone sitting next to you that you don't know, introduce yourself. Part of City Club is getting to know your neighbors, and that's the best way to do it. And another suggestion, every time you come, don't sit with the same group of people, move around, meet new people. Once you've spoken, once you've had an opportunity to discuss the program today, then we want you to formulate a question. And I know the speakers today are going to give you a few little exercises that they want you to go through at the table. But come up with a question that you want to ask the speakers. Appoint one person at your table to present that question. Then Larry Brame is going to be walking around with his microphone, giving you the opportunity to stand up and at each of the tables and ask that question. It's quick, it's simple. Keep your questions brief, keep them on topic, and we look forward to that. Finally, I want to turn this over to Susan Hay-Patrick, a City Club board member and Chief Executive Officer of United Way of Missoula, who's going to introduce our program today.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks, Jim. I don't see Mike Painter here today, our former fire chief, but he emailed me last week, and he's a frequent attendee and self-described City Club Missoula groupie, and he said that instead of the title that we chose, The Enigma of Growth in Missoula, we should have said Development in Missoula, or Growth in Missoula, a puzzling mystery wrapped in an enigma shrouded in a conundrum. And we did go back and forth about the title, but we decided on Enigma, which, as Merriam-Webster defines it, something hard to understand or explain. But here to explain it in ways that we can understand are Nick Kaufman and Jeremy Keene with WGM Group. Nick is a former president of the Chamber of Commerce, so many of you know him from those days. He's vice president and chairman of the board of WGM. Jeremy, and he spoke with us a couple of months ago when we talked about infrastructure in Missoula. Jeremy is a professional engineer and lead accredited professional with WGM Group. Both these guys have managed many, many local projects throughout our town. And again, to quote Mike Painter, he said, those two and WGM Group have have done, are doing, will continue to do great work in our little town, especially in the planning field. So please welcome Nick Kaufman and Jeremy Keene.
Thank you very much, Susan. So I'll start the ball rolling. If you look forward here, you can see the logo for City Club. And if you look at the logo for City Club, there's mountains in the backdrop, but the moon is in front and below the mountains. That's an enigma, right? So we'll talk about that today. And I also wanted to mention City Club. They're a playful bunch if you don't know them well. So our slideshow is over there with our notes for each slide. So Jeremy can see what I'm about to say, but playfully I don't get to, so we'll see how this all goes. So Missoula is a fantastic place, and it's all about quality of life. Today, we want to empower you folks to understand what the planning process is, because it's really simple. There's a couple of basic tenets to planning. Understanding those basic tenets allows you to engage in the frequent conversation that we have with both the city and the county as they bring forth great options for us to plan our destiny, and so we can invest in our destiny and make Missoula a great place and continue the legacy of this great community. By the way, hello, Dan Chemist. Nice to see you. All right. So we're going to talk today about what planning is, why we should plan, how we plan. We try to keep that a mystery. Where do we grow, which is always the question we have, and how do we remain a great place while we grow? And we're going to compare, Jeremy in his part of the presentation is going to compare our community to other communities around Montana so we can see how well we're doing compared to them. And then your table talk is, where do you think we should grow? So what is planning? So planning is a process, and really the first tenet of planning is the allocation of scarce resources to the best benefit of the community, all right? The allocation of scarce resources to the best benefit of the community. So I want to demonstrate that to you. So how many people here had to dress themselves this morning? How about Andy? You probably did, all right? Most all of us. All right, so I'm a bachelor fellow, so when I dress myself in the morning, my options are really limited, right? But among those limited options, I was able to put together an ensemble day, which is respectful of the audience, warm enough for the cool weather and breeze we have in Missoula. But I'd like Jim Royan, who's the president of City Club, to come on up. Stand right here, Jim, so the light will make your eyes sparkle. All right. Okay, so Jim had to get up and dress this morning. He's the president of City Club. Nice shoes, right? Polished, to say. Very conservative sport coat. And a nice tie, but as a conservative, aren't these redder and longer these days? All right. How did Jim do today? Let's give Jim a round of applause. All right. So, yeah, because nobody is sacred, Larry. Susan Haypatrick, why don't you come on up? So, Susan, chairman of United Way, part of City Club.
My board chair is here.
All right, thank you. And I see Jason, and I see Mike, I see some numbers. So, Susan, very smartly dressed, right? Of course, in blue. Red was over there, I think, so. All right. So, always respectful. Great smile on your face, right? Okay. Didn't quite dress for the weather, but how did Susan do? All right. So I just want you to know the basic tenet of planning then is what? The allocation of scarce resources to the best benefit of the community. The second aspect of planning then is to preserve our future options. We plan so we can preserve our future options. So when someone comes to you who's very conservative and says, you know what, I don't like you much, Kaufman, you're a planner. And I'm a rugged individualist and I just want to do whatever I want to do. Well, that's perfect, because that's exactly what planning allows. It allows that person the options to do whatever they want to do because we plan ahead so there are options, all right? So those are the two tenets of planning. Jeremy? Okay, why should we plan?
So we're gonna tag team this a little bit, and Nick is good at talking off the top of his head. I printed my notes, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. But when we talk about why we should plan, I think we have to start with what happens if we don't plan. And I think that the best way to think about that is that if we don't plan, our only choice is to react. So I was here a couple of months ago and we talked about transportation funding and infrastructure funding. And I want to go back to that for just a second, because I want you to think about a couple of questions. That even if we could afford everything that we know we need to build for infrastructure, would we be happy with the results? If we could build anything and everything we wanted, if we just built everything, would that be a good investment of those dollars? Go ahead. This is where Missoula homes existed in 1970. So Missoula is a compact community. We have a valley that's constrained geographically. We have rivers, we have mountains. And the reality is our area to grow, our area to develop is fairly limited. Next one. So this is 20 years later. You can see that the red dots are starting to expand into those areas and becoming maybe a little bit less compact. 2013, continuing to grow into the valley. Now looking ahead to 2023, so this is 40 plus years of growth. You can see how that available area in the valley floor is really starting to disappear. So the blue areas are the areas that growth is forecasted to occur. So think about how other communities in Montana grow and are geographically constrained. If you go to places like Bozeman or Kalispell or even Helena, a lot of those areas they're not as constrained in a valley, and their growth is a lot more broad and expansive. Go back a slide, please.
I always get ahead of them. I get so excited.
So what happens with growth often is that it follows the path of least resistance. We tend to develop in the places that are easier, but they're also harder to get to and harder to serve. So the result is that you often have insufficiencies with roads, with infrastructure, with your ability to provide services for schools, police and fire, all those things, the social infrastructure, the things that go into your neighborhood that make your neighborhood great. When we grow without planning, we don't have all of those things. And this hurts the quality of life. Now, we've done well in Missoula, and frankly, we're on the map. If you pay attention, you'll notice that we're listed in the top 10 of a dozen different rankings, and one of these pops up probably every other month. 100 best communities for young people, #1 place to pursue the American dream, 5th best commute time in the U.S., 5th most road scholars, 6th best river town in America, 8th best cycling city. So we're on the map. People have recognized Missoula as a place it's desirable to be. And so in a way, we're a victim of our own success. We've done well, but we're also starting to struggle with that problem of how do you accommodate all these newcomers, the growth that we're seeing. Okay. So that's reflected in our housing prices. The market is being taxed by growth, by demand, and we're starting to see, after we came out of the recession, which is kind of the start of this graph, 2010, we're really starting to see both the number of sales and the prices of housing starting to ramp up. There's something else going on, which is the demographic change that's happening. So this is the baby boomer curve. So we have, at the beginning of this ramp up is people turning 65, and this is the baby boomer generation starting to become 65, starting to retire. That red line is where we are at today, so you can see we're only about halfway through that pretty large trend. And this is changing housing demand and what people are looking for. So as we age, as we get older, we're much less likely to buy a home, more likely to sell. And where that red line is about the age of 65, and you can see that it really starts to flip there, that the trend of buying a home continues downward and the trend of selling goes up. And so people are, as you get into your 60s and 70s, you're more likely to sell, less likely to buy. And we're also seeing a change in housing size, so household size. So this is pretty remarkable if you think about it. The number of households without children in 1960 was 52%, in 2000 67%, and by 2025 they estimate 72%. So most of our households won't have children. What does that mean? It means smaller houses. So demand for housing type has changed. In 2003, our housing supply, we had that brown bar is large lots, so larger single-family lots. We had a large supply of that, and the blue is attached housing, so things like multifamily apartments, condominiums, townhomes, and then the green is small lot, so these would be smaller single-family homes, but fewer square feet in the home. So that has changed to where in what's predicted in 2025 is we have all of the large lot supply of homes that we're going to need. In fact, it actually declines a little bit. And the very right-hand side here is your net new units needed. So you can see the brown is actually in the negative. So we have fewer large lot homes needed, but both the attached and small lot housing types are where the new units are needed. So the demand is in these smaller types of housing formats. Okay, Mr. Kaufman.
So how we plan is really important. Jeremy talked about Bozeman. I don't want to make fun of Bozeman at all, but I talk with Andy over there at Territorial every once in a while, and we decided that neither one of our firms want to open our office in Bozeman because if we just wait a decade or so, they will grow to Missoula, right? They got Belgrade, they captured Belgrade, they're about to capture the flag at Manhattan and Amsterdam. That's not what we want to see, right? All right, so let's go up to our friends in Kalispell. So you guys just opened an office up in Kalispell. That's your last commercial, just so you know. But what did Kalispell do? Kalispell went up the Evergreen Highway to Columbia Falls and gobbled up Columbia Falls, right? And then they went up Highway 93 North and they gobbled up Whitefish, right? We don't want that. We don't want to see that, and we don't have that in Missoula. So how we plan is to make sure that we maintain the great place that we have. It used to be that people came to places because there were jobs. Now they come to places because that's where they want to live. They come to great places. Our comparative advantage in Missoula, right, Grant, is our great place, right? Okay, so what we do then is we do a subtractive process when we plan. We don't put our finger on a dot and say, this is where I want to live. We say, where are the places that we really don't want to live or we shouldn't live? Because resource protection, the natural environment are really important to our quality of place. So we try not to build in floodplains. State and federal lands don't want us building there. Agricultural land is a issue in our community. It's part of our quality of life. Our hillsides and being able to see the horizon around our community is our natural setting, and it is one of the things that makes Missoula great, okay? And then, of course, we really don't want to build on or near the airport for noise reasons and safety reasons. So let's see what happens as we start to pull these layers off of here and put them on the map. I think, what day did the creator have trouble with water in floodplains too? Not working? Okay. So if you take, we skipped one, but that's okay, you're an adaptive audience. So the floodway is the dark blue, the flood fringe is the light blue. We don't want to go there, right? Okay? And our state and federal lands, Missoula is blessed in terms of all the state and federal lands in the county. I'm not sure, Cola, if you know what percentage of Missoula County is federally owned, but it's a pretty high percentage. Yeah, and they don't pay much tax base either, I don't think so. All right, next slide.
54%.
Thank you.
Staff knows way more than
Yeah. Well, if we could get the next slide, all right, what we would look at is the airport influence area in terms of that particular rectangle around our airport and the landing zones and the surfaces that are associated with that. We would also see the areas of steep slope, right? Anything over about 25%, but maybe that model's changing. Do I need this?
yes, for
All right, thank you. So maybe that model is changing. You know, maybe as we start to expand in our valley, building on 25% slope might be something we want to chat about. I'm not sure about it myself. And then the agricultural lands. So when we put the prime and of state importance lands on here, right, and then we put of local importance lands on here, what we really have is about this area that you see developed with some of the foothills that are still available for Missoula. So the issue is, in the subtractive process in our mountain valley, right, we've consumed the larger acreage tracts, right, with development. We're left with some smaller pieces around us, all of which have to go into the decision of where we want to grow in the future. Now, Laval, you guys, when you did the 2015 R Missoula, prepared a land use map that showed some of the more developable pieces of property, right, from your studies, and you guys can find that online. Also in 2015, over in the county, you guys updated your growth policy, right? So both of those resources are available. So, Jeremy, thank heavens you're doing the technology and I'm not. All right.
I'm doing very well.
Right. So, no, just go forward. Let's get to the. All right. So, you'll remember this slide from Jeremy's presentation. This is what Headwaters Economics projected we would look like in 2023. This map is about the same scale as this map. So if you look at what we've subtracted, right, versus what the growth projection is, Houston, we have an enigma, right? We have an enigma because we have resource lands that make this a quality place, right? But if we look at how we've grown in the past and the land consumption component of that growth and project that growth rate and land consumption forward, this is what has been projected as a land coverage area, right? I don't know that that pattern of development matches what I see as a small, compact community. It's not small. It's a compact community because we have a large population. But given the examples that Jeremy talked about in terms of the sprawl from other cities, Helena to the north, Billings to the north, and Billings to the east, Missoula is a very compact community. We've given you the tools to think about planning and understand the planning process, which is the subtractive process. Now we want you to see this, the resource maps compared to the growth projections, because we're going to ask you during table talk, right, to get your opinions or questions about this particular enigma. Jeremy? All right. I can't wait.
So if you came here for answers, you're going to find out that we don't have them. This is a tough question, and I think that part of the discussion around where do we grow is understanding the process that Nick just took you through. It is understanding what are the things that are important to conserve, what are the places that we could allow development to happen that makes sense for our community. Next slide. So this unfortunately is what most places have done to respond to growth. This is the path of least resistance. It's the suburban sprawl model. And you know, the reality is that most people still prefer to live in a single-family house. They want the yard, they want the house, and this is the way that a lot of cities have responded to that demand. The results haven't been great. This has resulted in longer commute times. It's land consumptive. It tends to lack character. What's happening now is kind of exciting for those of us that do planning, those of us that would like to see other kinds of development opportunities happening. We're seeing more of a tendency for people to choose based on affordability, location, amenities being the factors that they're using to choose where they want to live. And the reality is that people want great places. They want places where they can walk and bike, where the social elements are there, where there's activity, entertainment, the ability to recreate, and the sense of community. So these are the options when we start talking about how do we develop as a more compact community, how do we not simply sprawl into every available piece of land that we have. These are some of the tools. So I think we all know about infill. We're going to give a little demonstration.
How are you guys doing? Is there a reason there's only 8 people at the table? Kind of got a comfort zone, as you guys? So this is why people get excited about infill development. How are we doing now? Move your hand. So, do I have to? So imagine how it's a duplex. So infill development becomes personal inside of a neighborhood.
So infill done well can work, but I think as Jason just experienced, when Nick sits in your lap, when your neighbor builds an apartment building next door to you, and it feels like a big change. It feels like something you're not comfortable with, maybe something that's not compatible with your neighborhood. So those are the trade-offs to doing simply infill development. We've seen both types in Missoula. So there's 2 examples here. One is a multifamily apartment building, and the other is a single-family small lot development. Both are good examples of how you can do infill in a way that is sensitive to the neighborhood and fits the context of where they're built. But we all know that this does create challenges. Redevelopment is a big opportunity for really all cities that have gone through the progression of developing and then having those areas transition to other uses. So these are a couple examples. Go back, please. A couple examples: the old Sawmill District, the proposed Riverfront Triangle project, both redevelopment projects of areas that had other uses in the past. And these are good tools for development, for accommodating higher density, increased. Obviously, the cost of doing this is more expensive. It's often a more difficult process. You run into environmental issues, issues of land ownership, demolition, but it can have good outcomes for revitalizing with new uses. Adaptive reuse. We've seen buildings be converted into other things. This is the Meadow Gold Dairy over on Spruce Street. Can be a tool to take an old building and revitalize it into something new. And if you're familiar with that area, the Drought Works and a number of other businesses have gone into the old warehouses that were surrounding the old dairy. So how do we remain a great place while we grow? Mr. Kaufman.
Okay, so I want you to all sort of not close your eyes because I don't want to know what you're going to imagine. But what makes great places? So, city, county, city government, county government over there, the citizens of Missoula, you guys have done such a fantastic job with this community because you've had planning since the early 70s. Not only did you have planning, you implemented planning and you invest in your future. So you plan your future, you invest in your future. $43 million for recreation and trails. $158 million for primary and secondary schools. $30 million for Hellgate Elementary School. $30 million for a library. Back in 2002, as progressive as we were now, we were much more progressive then. $10 million for an open space bond issue. You guys plan your future, you implement your future, and you saw in one of Jeremy's slides just how successful you are because how other communities see you. And it's a team. It's the county working with the city, and it's the city and county working together with the citizens, understanding what planning is, and you don't simply make decisions, right? Do you want to buy a Cadillac? Well, maybe if you were informed as a Cadillac compared to a Ford or a Chevy or a GMC, you could make a better decision. So in our planning decisions, we don't want to do that. We don't just want to put a finger and say, here's where we grow. We want to be well informed about our decisions. So what are we trying to preserve here? Because really, it's about healthy business. Healthy business supports local government and our nonprofits. They're the gatekeepers of our quality of life, and it's that quality of life that allows us to keep and retain our employees and attract employees for economic diversification, to keep our investment in Missoula all right? So here's how other people have looked at what quality of life is and what place is. So sociability, uses and activities, comfort and image, access, connected, suitable, walkable, green, safe, real, local business ownership, land use patterns, property values, traffic data, mode splits. We get to walk, we get to bike in Missoula, and we also get to drive. Parking, and it's down there at the bottom. All right, next one, please. All right, so a study was done recently, sort of in the Rocky Mountain West, about what things are the most important in terms of measures of quality of life. I want you to think about what your most important measure of quality of life would be, right? I'll explain to you what the study showed. So the overall quality of the community, our Missoula, right? The overall quality of the community right at the very top. Safe, recreation access. When I was on the chamber board, Laval came and talked to us. And Laval asked that chamber board, some 16 or 18 members, Kurt, you might have been there, what the most important thing about Missoula was. And they all wrote it down. And you know what? Top of the list was parks, recreation, and trails. That's your Missoula Chamber of Commerce, right? Okay? Good place to raise a family, place you like to show your friends, access to high-quality health care, high-quality public services, proximity to town and city center, ability to cross paths with neighbors and community members, reputation of the community, vibrant downtown and shopping, and school system. What don't we have, right? What does Missoula not have on that list? All right, let's try to preserve that. Next slide, please. All right, I think it's you. Mr. Keene.
So how do you think we should grow? So we're presenting you with a number of questions here, and we hope that in your table talk you can either help us answer the questions or come back to us with additional questions. But what we want you to think about is how do we provide for growth in a way that makes sense? Where do we put housing? How do we increase the supply of housing, which has a direct effect on affordability? Where do we put our commercial uses? Where do we put Costco? That's been a recent question in our community. What do we do to protect ag land? What do we do to protect the hillsides? What about the rivers and the floodplains? So if you look at the maps on your table, which is the same map that Nick had up on the screen, when you take away all these things, what do you have left? Where are the places that we can still accommodate growth? There's no right or wrong answer to this. Planning is about controlling your own destiny, and that starts with the kinds of discussions that we're having today. It starts with people being involved and participating in making those decisions. So we're gonna let you talk, and then we'll stick around and have some additional discussion, Q&A, after you're done visiting amongst yourselves. Okay.
All right, let's take a few minutes, and we're going to start the going around from table to table and asking questions. And Ray here is our official microphone person. And the only request that we have is that when you do ask a question, you try to keep it brief. Try not to make statements, but ask a good question, and then we'll move on to the next table. So Larry, if you'd like to, whichever table's ready for you. You guys ready over here? Should we go clockwise? One clockwise. One question into the mic for the TV guys.
How does Missoula continue to grow and still allow for your average family that makes, $40,000 to $50,000 a year to live inside the city limits and to enjoy the quality of life without expanding the geographic footprint of the city?
So I'll start that. So first of all, preferences are changing. So in the era I grew up, 100 by 100 lot, 10,000 square feet was suburbia, Bellevue, Wapakia for Missoula, if you will. I don't know in the 40 years that I've been a planner that I've ever designed a subdivision with a 100 by 100 foot lot. So that type of pattern is with us, and they're hard to redevelop, except for, progressiveness in the city. We allow ADUs and some other types of additional development now in our zoning. The preferences, as Jeremy showed you, are more for people my age. What happened during the recession is we just didn't lose economic growth for 6 or 7 years. We all aged 6 or 7 years. And some of us aged into the next category where our preferences change. And so for folks like me, it's inevitable, I wish it wasn't, but I'll be vacating where I live to go to someplace else, and there's a whole lot like me. And so right now, the real estate people are here. They did their presentation 2 weeks ago, I think, which you should get a hold of from the Missoula Organization of Realtors. But the median price is going up. It's around $245, $250 right now in Missoula because of lack of supply. But the city, for their part, through the redevelopment agency over in North Reserve Street, they've used some of that funds to help provide for affordable housing. As a community, Susan Haypatrick and United Way has a special housing group. I know it's something for the mayor. That's a great question. I don't have an answer for you, except the demand will be a little bit different than it was in the past.
All right, next question. This table's not ready. You guys ready? Cliff? She's ready? No, she's not. Okay, this is bad out here. You guys have a question? Okay, well, I'm going to move. I don't know. Is this a table? Yeah. One question.
How does the city encourage developers to build the maximum density as recommended in some of these new plans, like the Brook Street Corridor plan, and some of these other plans, as opposed to lesser density when greater density is both acceptable and recommended in these plans?
That's a professional question.
So one of our biggest opportunities to provide more supply is developing these more urban areas. The Grayfield and Brownfield areas, like the Sawmill District, where you can create new housing in the urban area. This is easier for the city to supply services, water and sewer, all the things you have to do for development. I think what the city has done well is they've looked at those areas and they've tried to figure out how they can offer incentives to see those areas redeveloped. So the tax increment financing, which is, we have about 5 different districts in the city that help provide money to development, for development to happen in a place where the city feels it makes sense. So your question was a little bit more specific about how do you get the maximum density out of those places. I think what we're seeing as we go forward is a little bit more focus on how those public monies are spent towards projects that really do maximize those densities and create good development patterns in the places where we think they can be supported. So the Brooks Corridor is one we've been looking at for a long time. We haven't seen that level of density development yet, but we're trying to figure out the right tools to make that happen. There's a couple of important things happening coming up. One of them is the Design Excellence Project. This is a project that will look at doing design standards for possibly corridors or specific areas in town to really look at how we develop those sites in a more detailed way. And some of those things that could be included in the design standards would be maximum densities or minimum density requirements to get that kind of development built in there.
Most of this stuff has been happening in cities around the country for as long as there's been a country, with maybe the exception of the demographic change, the baby boomer retiring. So my question for you as professional planners is, how are you taking the good, successful examples from around the country and applying them to Missoula? Because there are tried and true cases out there, and it seems like we could just go around and talk about this forever and ever, like someone at our table had said, but something has to happen. So what are we going to do? Just bypass the democratic process and take the good ideas and implement them because they're out there, or what? So I guess my question is, what's your role in making what you know probably ought to happen?
Well, it starts with community will. And I think for as long as I've lived in Missoula, which is over 20 years, we've had the community consensus to say we want to develop inward. We want to focus our growth inward and avoid that kind of sprawl that we've seen in other places that can be so destructive. Now, that's not to say we're not going to still develop out. I think the answer is we're going to still have both, but we've focused on doing infill and more density compact development because that's what the community has said they want. So it is kind of a democratic process in that sense. From a professional planning standpoint, what we have to do is help guide where those investments happen, both on the private side and maybe even more importantly on the public side. So the city has done a good job of focusing where they spend their money on the areas that can support the kind of development they want to see.
All right. So it all begins with leadership. So I'm going to walk over here by this guy. So back when Dan Kemmis was mayor, he, with city funds, identified people in the community that were actually responsible for doing development, developers and consultants. And he packed us all up and took us to Portland, Oregon for a 3-day seminar to look at how in Portland they protected their neighborhoods and still were able to grow. And so what he did is he enabled and empowered the people in his community on the private side, as well as the folks in the planning offices, to understand the different trends. Now today we have a different world of internet, and we're all tuned into it, and we've shared webinars with the folks from the city and the county. But city and county have both opened their offices in a very unique way. You don't have to come to see a land consultant to find out what kind of density the growth policy allows or what the zoning is. You can bop down to development services and get treated just like you were part of a team, right? And embraced in a way that is objective and fair and reasonable, right? And supportive of the type of development we have. The same thing with Missoula County. And so both local governments, through their planning office, are open to the public to talk about ideas. And I'll tell you, they're very contemporary in terms of what's going on in other parts of the community, as are the consultants that work in Missoula, Montana. You wouldn't have the compact community you have today if we weren't looking over the best fences, right?
Okay, here's a hot topic. So we have a really big chunk of land called the fairgrounds. What is the possibility and how closely is that being looked at to possibly move the fairgrounds out of town, say to the old French Mill pulp site or Frenchtown pulp site, and then do some infill on the fairground site?
So that's a great question. So when you look at places like the fairgrounds, you have to ask a couple of questions. One is that what's the public value of that land? We have it's a rare opportunity to have a major piece of property, 45 acres, that's publicly owned. And so before we jump to moving the fairgrounds and developing that land for housing, I think you have to ask, what else does that land provide in that neighborhood? And I think that when you look at denser developments, you have to also look at where's the open space. When you don't have a backyard, where do you go to walk your dog or let your kids play Frisbee? And those kinds of properties are really important in the fabric of our communities. So I think that while it might be possible to move the fairgrounds and redevelop it, it's an important question to ask before you jump to saying that should happen. You want to add anything to that?
No, I absolutely agree, and it's a great question because it's a really informed question. It's looking at what our resources are and what the best allocation of those resources are. So you asked a question about one specific use, and Jeremy responded in terms of just how important that piece of public land is and different paradigms. There's someone in the audience, might be Cliff Larson, who would like to see horse racing come back. I'm not sure, but I'm not going to let him speak, but that's for darn sure.
I'd like to take Nick's comments one step further. And one of the biggest considerations for anything like this is leadership. And I think we all owe Dan Kemmis a big thank you for what he did to lead the city. And taking off on your question about other examples, I think, unfortunately, what we've got here is very similar to what happened to the Bay Area maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago, when San Francisco became a very, very strong economic engine, even better than it was. People couldn't buy a house, so they moved to the peninsula. And the peninsula became basically the bedroom community for San Francisco. We now have a huge number of people who commute every day from Ravalli County. And I would pose that this map is only half of the map. The other half has to be included is Ravalli County. So the question is, how are we working with Ravalli County so it can't, or hopefully doesn't become what the peninsula became, which is why many, many people have left, which is why I left. The commute became impossible.
I'm gonna give this to Nick, but I'll first say that that's an important point, because when we don't have a place for growth to happen in Missoula, it doesn't mean growth doesn't happen. Growth will go down the valley towards Ravalli County. It'll go out towards Frenchtown. It'll happen in those places where we may not want it to happen.
So Russ, that's a great question. So when I first got involved in the planning office way back, I worked there for about 1.5 years, and I just gotten married, and they, in their great way, sent me to Marana, Arizona for 2 weeks with a bunch of Forest Service people to learn about problem solving. But when I flew out of Missoula, I flew right over Valley County, and I looked down, and I saw all these mobile homes, and I relaxed in my seat, just a sigh of relief, because you know what? As the economy goes up and down, those mobile homes come right off, and that beautiful landscape that was the Bitterroot Valley, right, in my opinion, naive opinion at that time, could have been preserved. Now, Ravalli County has gone from 3 commissioners to 5 commissioners. It does not have an adopted growth policy. It's a little bit schizophrenic in terms of how they do and how they approach planning. I guess that's all I can say. I think that Ravalli County, you know, I'm glad they're south of us, and there's a small pass that you have to go through. And no, Lolo's not part of Ravalli County. Everybody need to know that Ravalli County starts way south of Lolo, and Lolo's part of Missoula. All right, I'll let you.
I'm speaking for our table, but actually not for most of them because they're all elected and they prefer not to ask questions. So I have a question. It's about height restrictions. And the reason I have that is that I spent 30 years, I think, in Washington, D.C., and that's a city that's had a height restriction for 200 years. There really aren't any canyons there because nothing's taller than the Capitol, as far as I know. The canyons are outside, you know, the tall skyscraper things. It's worked well, but it's not 3 stories. It's a little bit higher. And so I'd like to ask if there's some ways to show what eliminating or changing the current height restrictions would do, not to create canyons, which is what we're all afraid of, especially for housing, but for really responsible development. I think Pauley Square is 4 stories, right? And that doesn't seem canyon-like to me, but then I'm looking to, you know, we're one of the age group that might want to live there. But I'm interested in the height restriction issue and what you know about what other cities have done, like ours.
Well, I think the majority of zoning in Missoula allows for 125 feet of height in the commercial zones, in the kinds of places like where Pauley Square is getting built. And what we were seeing is mostly a 4- and 5-story building pattern. It's more of a mid-rise kind of development than high-rise. Now in the downtown, the zoning allows the buildings to be taller. So that's something that's important to think about when we think about our hillsides and our views and the way that we can see out from our community. I'm not familiar with what other cities have done as far as restricting heights, but I think that in our design excellence project, that's an important consideration, is to talk about building heights and view corridors.
I think Jeremy's right. I think we need to figure out where height's going to go. And I think that the form that height takes in terms of step backs and other things are really, really important in terms of the form, the urban form we create. So one of my best images is I was in Denver one time when it wasn't snowing. I can't remember exactly when that was, maybe August. But I was looking at downtown Denver, these massive skyscrapers. And right next to the massive skyscrapers is this little brick church, looked about this tall. So in Denver, it's a neighborhood, and then it's, wow, you know, straight up. But I like that. That's an edge, right? It's not straight up neighborhood, straight up. That's the canyon that I don't want to be in. That's a great question.
Yeah, Nick, Grant here. I think just a couple of things we liked as a group where we talked about some of the infill and redevelopment that's happened, Scott Street. We did talk a little bit about Pauley Square and the old Mill Site District. One of the things that came up was the issue of a lot of the redevelopment that's happening doesn't include an affordable housing component, or is happening at such a high end that it doesn't serve the core median home price or help bring down the median home price relative to current salaries in Missoula. So I was recently on a trip to Vermont looking at, they do some interesting stuff there with conservation and development actually being funded by the same board statewide. One of the things they talked a lot about was inclusionary zoning. Can you talk a little bit about inclusionary zoning and what it would do to land use patterns, if you have any sense of that here?
Well, I'll talk about inclusionary zoning a couple of different ways. So one of the things we don't have enough of is housing, right? And you talked about affordable housing. If we do inclusionary zoning, when I do a subdivision for affordable housing, part of that development, let's say it's 100 units, gets allocated to affordable housing. So let's say it's 25%, so 25 units get allocated for affordable housing. With inclusionary zoning, the other 75 homes pay for those 25 homes. So if housing paying for housing, that's a really bad model. That's a horrible model, as a matter of fact. Right now, we have more renters in Missoula than we have homeowners. Why is that interesting? Because when you're a homeowner, you're no less a citizen, but you get something that the renter doesn't get. It's called the property tax bill. Right, and the property tax bill shows you what you're paying for and allows you to be more informed, actually, right, as you participate in community. I don't want Missoula to be all homeowners, but I want people in Missoula to have the option to either own a home or rent a home, and right now they don't have that option. For you, all of you, decide whether it's a community issue that you want to address as a community, or decide whether you want to keep it in the housing corner, so housing is subsidizing housing, which does nothing but shift the cost of housing around. So I'm not a fan of inclusionary zoning in most cases that I've seen.
Hey guys. At the beginning of your presentation, you gave us a long list of all the places we should not or would not want to build. And in your expert opinion, if you're looking to free up land for development, which one of those categories would you give up?
Ravalli County? No.
I live there, thanks.
I'm just teasing.
Just saved Ravalli County.
Well, thanks, Clint. That's a really unfair question. It's a community taken as a whole, right? And one of the most important things that I love about this community are the two rivers that run through it. The other thing I love about this community is that as I stand here, I can see my horizons for almost 360 degrees, except where the valley opens up to the west. That's critical, and it's really important. We've marched over the hills in one part of Missoula, and what it does is it brings the community much closer together than when you can see the natural surroundings that you're associated with. I can't recommend for you on what the trade-off would be, but the whole reason today is to empower you to not avoid that question, to understand that if you dress yourself in the morning, then you can look at the scarce resources that we have and the needs that we have, including affordable housing, and figure out how to make your trade-offs. So how do you keep a great community, right? And how do you still grow? You grow more compact, you pay more attention to what demand is, right? You look more towards performance standards in subdivisions so that you a subdivision is spending something, it's spending land, right? When you spend land, you should spend it in the best way possible for the people who are going to live there to make a place that they'll want to stay and make a place that fits within and makes the community greater. I'm not saying spend 3 years to review a subdivision. I'm saying spend less time than we do now. But instead of do this, do this, do this, don't let something through that's not designed correctly. Because as a community, we can't afford it. Nor can we afford longer, more cumbersome, more costly processes because we are trying to provide housing at the affordable range.
So at our table, we talked about Costco and their wish to have a bigger facility. And it was our understanding that that was principally because they want a bigger parking lot. But at the same time, it was also our understanding that many of their customers come from Idaho and as far away as Idaho and from the Bitterroot. And we questioned, why don't they just build a store somewhere else? And you didn't like that idea, so I want to know why.
Well, I was thinking that, excuse me, I was thinking you were talking about a store halfway between Stevensville and Lolo, and I wasn't appreciating that. Or if we're thinking of building one halfway between Frenchtown and Missoula, I'm not appreciating that. Or somewhere between here and Evero Hill, I'm not going to appreciate that either. The thing I like about Reserve Street, North Reserve Street, it's close to our community, right? The North Reserve Street of Kalispell is closer to Whitefish than it is downtown Kalispell, right? We know how to do this, and we know how to do it better than a lot of other people have done it.
I think the most exciting thing for me in seeing the way development trends are changing is that before we spend that land that Nick talked about, before we grow outward, we have to turn over every stone inward to make sure that we're using those lands as efficiently and utilizing them as much as we can. And I think that, you know, the the inevitability of growing outward is still there, but I think we're focused on how do we develop inward and how do we create those places for things to happen. The Costco discussion is exactly that, because when you take a major use like Costco, and if it leapfrogs out to the Y, there will be a wave of development that goes with it. And this is what happened in Kalispell. They developed away from the core of the town, and everybody went with it, and now you have a new commercial center that's not in the center of town. So that's the decision process that we have to make when we choose where things develop, and it's really an important thing to understand.
You talked about the older people who are not buying homes or are going to be selling homes, et cetera, but you didn't talk about where the demand is, which are millennials and younger. So Bozeman has an effort underway, and I'm wondering if Missoula, or you know of any effort in Missoula for a tiny home development, which is something that the millennials are now demanding more and more.
Or us back in our day, we called that an RV park, right? Yeah, that's right. I think I've seen something in the paper where one of the affordable housing groups is proposing not specific tiny homes, but smaller accommodations to address that. I have read an awful lot about tiny homes. I'm fascinated by them. This gets down to when you do a preference survey and you say, where do you want to live and what do you want, okay? And you forget to ask what their income is, right? Because demand is, I want it and I can afford it, okay? And so the tiny home thing is an interesting one, because I don't know that a tiny home makes a community, Russ. That's the only thing I don't know. They're great pictures. You might have more information on that than I do, but it's a great one that needs an answer, and I don't have it for you.
I'll just add to that. I think whether you call them tiny homes or not, I think part of the solution to getting more housing supply is creating more smaller lots. And what I think we might see in the future, and this might be a ways down the line, but I think we're going to start to see some of those larger lot developments looking at subdividing or adding ADUs or other secondary uses to infill the density within those what used to be larger lot properties. Because, like you said, the demand with the millennials and with the baby boomers right now is smaller household size. And so to accommodate those smaller houses, I think we need more of the smaller size lots.
And closer in.
Derek Goldman here. So two things. First, I'll disagree with my friend Nick about the inclusionary zoning. I don't see anything wrong with having the higher end housing pay a little bit more so that there's some housing that's guaranteed, attainable, and affordable. I don't see that as a problem. But bigger picture is when we have these discussions here and more broadly in the community, it seems like we always focus on supply rather than demand. Because I think some of the issues we're seeing, particularly this issue with the rising median price of housing, is not a supply problem. I see it as a demand problem. We have a great place to live, and more people want to live here. So we ask ourselves, is there anything that we're doing to increase demand that maybe we could do less of? Because I don't think it's possible to just have more land and build our way to lower home prices. It's never happened anywhere. I've been here almost 20 years, and we've probably increased the housing supply, I'd guess, by maybe almost a third, and the price just keeps going up.
No, that's, you know, Jeremy has an answer. He forgot it. It was on the slideshow, Derek, and it was the one that says we're the victim of our own success, right? And so we've created a great place, and you know, thank heavens we have, because there's certain paradigms out there that we couldn't predict. I think going into the recession, we predicted we'd have a heck of a shortage of workforce, and I think in Missoula there's a heck of a shortage of workforce right now across all fields. It's not just the region that's competing with our workforce, it's the United States of America that's competing with our workforce, and it's actually the world that's competing with our workforce. We have to come to grips with the fact that the University of Montana enrollment is declining, but we have a great interim leader there, and we'll see where that all emerges. We have to come to grips that regional care, when they purchased Community Hospital, didn't build all the buildings and hire all the docs that they projected they were going to do. we only have Roseburg as a primary manufacturer, and they're great. You know, they're great to their employees and a wonderful employment package. But in Missoula, Montana, there's very few companies, ours is one, that provide full health care insurance to their employees, just so you know. We need to have a great place so that we can attract trained workforce and retain a workforce so that we get the kind of jobs, right, that we want in our community. That's how we control our destiny. The other end of it, I don't know how you stop population growth. Derek, I wish I did, but I don't have an answer for that. But I like your observation. We've made such a great place that we've made it attractive for a lot of people. How many people were born in Montana in the room today? All right, good showing.
Let's do one more and then we'll close up.
All right, this is a short question for you. You mentioned never planning with lot sizes 100, 120. You mentioned going to smaller lot sizes. What size lots do you plan for?
Well, if you run out to Canyon Creek Village, which is out on Expressway, those lots are 25 feet deep and 125 feet wide and 125 feet deep. Windsor Park, which is right next door, are lots that are 30 feet wide. They're what are called traditional neighborhood designs. They have central parks of at least 5 acres. They have homes that face into the park on all 4 sides, so it's a safe place for kids to play. If I put a park against your outdoor living area, I have a public space against your private outdoor space, and I'm going to build a 6-foot-high fence. And I can show you subdivisions in Missoula where the common area or park are up against the back of homes, and that whole side is a 6-foot-high fence. There's no eyes on the park, right? Understanding how design works makes a great place. So if you go out to Canyon Creek Village, which is getting some age on it, you'll find that it actually looks great, and it continues to look great because it was designed that way. It was intentionally designed with a central park. It was intentionally designed so when you come out, you look at Lolo Peak. It was intentionally designed with alley access. It was intentionally designed with boulevard sidewalks and parking, right? And people move from Canyon Creek Village because socioeconomically they make more money and then move to another neighborhood, right? But those are great neighborhoods, and we couldn't replicate them anywhere close in because we didn't have enough land to do the parks and the design. Now, 44 Ranch, it's another great neighborhood, but it's not all traditional neighborhood design. There are a lot of front loads, and those are 60-foot wide lots. But Russ, if you go to a tiny home that's 16 feet wide and you put 5 feet on either side of it, you're in a lot now that's wider than Canyon Creek Village by 1 foot, right? And there, between Windsor Park, Canyon East, and Canyon Creek Village, there's close to 300 and some homes out there.
Nick, Jeremy, thank you. Very good. Appreciate it. Again, I'd like to thank you for coming. One of the better programs we've had. So again, and also thank you for the questions. Very, very good questions. That's right on my list. Next month is the 2017 Montana Legislative Session in Review, featuring House Minority Whip Nate McConnell and House Majority Whip Brad Sheeta. But please look at your calendars because we've had to change the regularly scheduled date. Normally, we meet on the second Tuesday of the month, but or Monday of the month. But because of some scheduling issues, we've had to move it to the third Monday of the month. So in May, our meeting will be on May 15th at the Doubletree. And one of the things to know when you make your schedules online is the Doubletree requires us to sort of cut off registrations on either Saturday and Sunday so they know what it is. So if you wait till Saturday or Sunday evening to book your reservation, we may already be closed. And, we can go up to, 100 people, but we need to know that ahead of time. So what I'm saying is don't wait till the last minute to make your reservations. And spread it with your friends. If you're on Facebook, please include this, like it, and spread it out. If you have an email web group of people you send to, please send it out that way. And let's try to have a good presentation and program next time. Thank you for coming. Thanks for the City Club people who helped put this together. Thanks to our sponsors, and we'll see you on May 15th.